the quiet of my soul, where doubts and fears take hold. I feel a gentle breeze, your presence sets me free. The touch of love so soft yet strong heals my heart where I belong. God's embrace, so long caress, calming every storm and stress.
Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, whatever time you're listening to this podcast. So happy that you're able to join us today. Listen, what we're going to talk about today is very, very important. The time to kill. But before we get into the podcast, let me invite you to click on that button below. Or is it to the side, or is it up or down? I don't know. But usually they say on the podcast below. So please check out that button and click it. We're trying to improve in our ministry. And the more clicks we get, the more we're able to give you tremendous substantial content, not just for commercial, but for life building, life changing experience. And I'm very serious about that. So please think about it, act about it, be about it, and let's get on with the podcast this evening. Now, we are experiencing a lot of trauma today. Just this week alone, we had two, at least recorded in my area, two mass shootings. Not that the mass shootings took place here, but the news reached this area where I am. And who knows what's happening in your neighborhood. And so we had car shooting, school shootings, and this 1 week after, there hasn't been a week that has gone by without us hearing about some type of shooting. When we talk about shooting, we're talking about killing. When we consider killing, we're dealing with suffering. When you consider suffering and killing and things like that, yes, it raises the question, why? I mean, aren't we intelligent people? Don't we have wills and power to choose? Why is it that some elect to kill? And we're going to look into that. And then the questions that people usually have is, and then again, it may not be a question. It may be just like, if I was God, I wouldn't let all this stuff happen. And if God was really love, just look at the world today and look at the environment. Look how these animals are killing things and stuff like that. You cannot convince me that God is love. I've heard people say this, and they meant every word of it. But is there a rhyme and reason for it? And must there be a killings? And if so, is there a proper time to kill? Now, the Bible says there is a time to kill. I'm sure they made movies out of this, and things like that. But what does the Bible say? We're going to look into that today. And with me today to help discuss this is Mr. Johnson. Now, Robert Johnson has been with us before, and I just love having him on the show. He's a highly intelligent man who, I let him tell you more about himself. But before we do, I wanted to show you this video clip that I want you to see from another highly intelligent person. Could you roll that clip, please?
My people are so smart. And you know what else they say about my people? The polls. They say, I have the most loyal people. Did you ever see that? Where I could stand in the middle of Fifth Avenue and shoot somebody and I wouldn't lose any voters, okay? It's like incredible.
Now, I wanted you to see that clip because we have the incoming president stating that his people are so smart that he can stand on the corner and shoot somebody and not be convicted. Now, I'm sure you've heard that before, and many people claim that he said he would shoot somebody and he wouldn't be convicted, right? Because his people are so smart. But if you listen closely, what he's saying is that there are more than one ways to understand something. There are circumstances, there are reasons why a person may kill, there's a reason why certain people may shoot somebody. You may stand on the street corner. You may end up having to kill someone, and your loved one may not convict you because your loved one may know something behind the scene that may have caused you to do that. Right? Now you have to understand there may be a time to kill, right? Whether you're on the street corner or whether you're in the field, whether you're in a house, in a barnyard, there may be a time to kill. Now, unfortunately, the statement was taken many times out of context, and the man was looked upon as a
Mhm.
crazy person. And I have to admit, I was somewhat convinced myself based on how they spun this thing. But when you look at what he said, my people are so intelligent that stand on the street corner and kill somebody. Is it murder? Is it self-defense? That depends on the intelligence of the people, right? Uh, um, how about Mr. Johnson? Would you come down and come with me here and let's discuss that part, please? What do you think?
Well, I mean, we jumped right in, and I'm thinking for me, every time that I think about tragedy, for me, tragedy was 9/11. And in my head, I always pondered, why would God allow people to drive a plane into a building full of people and cause those individuals to die? Now,
Mm,
apart from all the reasons why you think the 9/11 existed and happened, one of the things that came to my mind is that suffering peels away the layers of self-dependency. And what happens with self-dependency is that basically you're God, right? And so when God allows these things to happen that are out of our level of control, we're now forced to depend on Him.
mm,
And
mm,
that codependency is the thing. One of the reasons that I believe that God allows for there to be this level of suffering, especially when there is a time, if there's a such thing, a time to kill.
mm. No, okay, all right. You said if there's a such thing as a time to kill.
Right,
Okay.
right. Because when God created something, I'm saying, did He create it to be killed,
Mm, okay.
or did
All
He
right.
create it to have everlasting life? And the
Mm,
Bible tells us that He creates because He wants that thing to have everlasting life, and the essence of a creation. I mean, I've never seen anybody who created something, anybody, not just God, who said, you
mm.
know what, I'm gonna create this to kill it. Most of the time, you create something that's for longevity, and so
Yes.
we know the power of creativity and creation is not to kill, and so we can
Mm,
just use that as the foundation, and then as it relates to a time to kill. Now, listen, I'm in the Marine Corps. I'm a sniper, and I was a sniper in the Marine Corps, 4th LAR Light Reconnaissance Unit out of Quantico, Virginia.
okay.
And I've had interactions with people. And my thought with it is that there is a time that you have to defend your land, for instance, a time
Mm,
to kill.
mm,
I'm thinking about Joshua when he fought the Battle of Jericho,
mm,
you know, because at some point, even they were fighting on the Sabbath because they had to have fought on the Sabbath because we know that they did it 7 days straight, and we don't know what day they started on. And
right.
so we know that even war happens and is corroborated, if you would, by God and Him having the ability to wage war even on the Sabbath. And
Wow.
so now the
Wow.
question is, you see what I'm saying? Because think about it, they blew their horn, they're marching around this facility, Jericho, and at
Mm,
some point the walls come crumbling down, and then they attack the city and kill everyone in the city.
mm, yeah.
And so we now
Wow.
know that God. Go ahead, you were about to say something.
No, 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 no. I'm just saying,
No,
wow.
so we now know that God put out a hit. Let's just call it what it is. Now,
Mhm.
this particular hit that God put out was because there was strangers in the land and they had taken over the land, and those people who were in that land weren't of God. And
One
so
of
now the
God.
question is, they weren't God's people.
Oh,
The people
okay.
behind the walls of Jericho were God's people.
Hmm.
And
Okay.
so
So
now God authorized the attack of. Go ahead. You got
no,
questions,
no,
it sounds like.
yeah, I got a lot of questions, but go ahead. I don't want to stop the flow. Go ahead. Go ahead.
And so as I'm thinking about it, there's fighting on the Sabbath. There's
Hmm.
killing by God's people. And so
Hmm.
this to me throws out the whole thing about conscientious objectors, because God is clear that we are to pick up arms if we need to defend ourselves and hold our positions. And the question is, why have we gone so light-footed? And I won't use the word punkish because that might be too, but I'll use the word light-footish on situations where we need to put some force and power behind what we believe, and
Mm.
instead of being so light-footed on. And I think we've gone to that position, but it's not a position that I think we should stand in. And we're seeing that we're losing a lot of families and a lot. There was this saying a while ago in the early '90s: is people were playing "Lord, increase my territory, enlarge my territory."
Yeah.
Right now, in our environment, it appears, and I use that word graciously, that our territory is not being enlarged, that is shrinking for all of the things that we're not speaking up against. And here's the thing. I know that we're talking about kills specifically as it relates to the individuals who had the catastrophes this week and the last week at schools. But think about if we took arms to kill starvation or poverty. So we know that there's a time to kill these things. Now the question is, how do we utilize killing so that it balances out life? Because God wants us to have. He say, I came to give you life and life more abundantly. How do we get to a point where killing is something that is acceptable?
Yeah.
And I
So
think
now,
that's.
yeah. See, before you go on, now this is what I'm thinking about. Now, you raised several, I call them conundrums. Yeah, number one, they laid out the foundation that God, who creates anything, just to kill it, right? And so my mind went to the Garden of Eden. The idea that the serpent is on the tree hanging out. Eve comes by, and the serpent says, well, you know that God says you will not surely die. Now, the
Mm,
logic is God is the God of the living and not the dead. That is just
yeah.
perpetuate life and life and life, which says that the serpent's argument was reasonable. It was logical. How can that which is highly intelligent, highly organized, even think about death? So then, in my book, I dealt with that. I'm pandering my book, right? But anyhow, I dealt with that concept because God is the God of the living and not of the dead. So then, why does He say, "In the day that you eat thereof, you will die"? Does He kill? What's going on there? Is God still perpetuating life? And I think that's where you were going with that, right? Getting that balance. So before we go on, I think there is. I want us to look at this clip. I want you to look at this clip. Okay.
Prolific serial killer, having confessed to 93 murders.
He was not shy about what it felt like to kill.
A man in England, he's in his 50s, tossed his mother off a balcony because she had Alzheimer's. She was in the final stages of care and he just felt sorry for her. He saw her suffering. He couldn't stand seeing her in pain, so he tossed her off the balcony. She died. She landed headfirst. In court, the judge said he loved her and it was a mercy killing. Do you think that was right?
That's a tough question because I was.
Why is it tough? He killed his mother. Do you sympathize with him or do you condemn him?
You get that? The man kills his mom, tossed her off the balcony, said it was mercy killing. And the interview goes on, and people are confused as to whether or not the man should be found guilty, and so forth. The judge in this particular case ruled that the man it was a mercy killing, throwing the woman off the roof. So then now we have a society that says that what are we saying if that's mercy killing? Even if you can recall back in the 80s, Jack Kevorkian, the the suicide doctor, to help people to die, you know. How is this? Is that a proper time? Or is that showing mercy? Let me put it that way. And as we were talking about God giving life, and so it is, is God throwing us off the balcony because we are sick? And so on the way down, we hit our heads and die instantly? Is this the view that people have of mercy?
You know, as I'm thinking about it, the term euthanasia comes to my mind, and the term hospice. Euthanasia is the process of assisting someone in taking their life. And we know that in America, in a few states, I know it's legal in Hawaii, California, and Colorado. I know that there's more, maybe even Maine, because I've worked with California as my degrees are in family counseling. And I find it very, very suspicious when, for instance, a family member has a insurance policy on their life, and their loved ones have the ability, because of the physical inability of them to do something for someone to take their life, and still take advantage of that policy. And so we know that it's legal in America, and the question is it ethical? And then if money is not involved, then still can you do it? And we see it happening all the time in hospice care. You know, someone has a terminal illness, and they're taking medications that basically takes them from this world, that brings them to what we call the life-ending situation. And so, being politically correct, there are political and legal times here in America that is considered legal. And so, as the base, but as I go back to what I said before, nobody is created thinking that life comes to an end. You know what I'm saying? The first essence of life is that we live life and have it more abundantly. And so when I think about euthanasia, when I think about hospice, those are the organized activities. But I think, the bigger question is, like with the gun laws or states that don't have gun laws. Like, I'm thinking about a Chicago, that you're not allowed to have guns in Chicago, but it's the place where most of African American young men are killed, versus a place like Texas, where a lot of people carry guns, but you're not seeing a lot of people being killed in those areas. And I always wonder if, and this is just a side note question, if the places where they carry, because people know that they're going to get opposition with another person who might have a gun, then they won't carry a gun to kill other people, versus in places where you can't carry, you know that you won't get opposition, and therefore you carry because you can kill freely. And I think that most of the cowards that we see with these actions who are killing with guns are in a place where they know that they will not get opposition. If you want to go kill, join the military. If you want to do it legally, become a medical professional who specializes in hospice, or who, makes the rules for that. Now, here's the thing that I'm against, though. And I want to bring this other tie. So it's euthanasia, hospice, but there's eugenics. And eugenics is the process of policy making, specifically in North Carolina. I actually had a chance to visit the place, and the eugenics committee that was back in 2008 still existed, and they still met, and they still talked about ways to take people out. I know that they settled in 2013 why they um, took the right for women to bear children away through birth control before they were even ready to have their children. So if you ever get a chance, look at that. So there's a lot to ponder over, about this is there a time to kill?
Yes, there is. Yes, there is. But not but. In addition to what you're saying, when we think about those things, euthanasia, what you call that, genetics, um, and
Eugenics.
eugenics, right? Eugenics. When you think about these things, population control and stuff like that, people have their reasoning for killing. The question is, there is a sovereign God. Doesn't matter if you want to kill or not. It is God that has given mankind the ability to kill, right? And you brought up two things.
Right.
One thing
Choice.
that I want to focus on, and that is like defense. You say if you want to kill, join the military. That brings the concept of defending, right? You want to defend that which is rightly yours. Okay. Now, I think we
Yes.
can look at that idea of defending, right? So what cause do you have? And I think people need to look at the cause, because if the cause is not based on true love, then the killing is actually murder. Okay? Because if a person, if a person has the upper hand on an individual, they can either take that individual life or let that individual go, let that individual become a servant or something like they did in the olden days, and let them work. Hopefully they change, or maybe like today, incarceration, put them in jail or reform, whatever the case may be, take them away from society. The idea of taking someone's life, to me, is something that you hear people say, that's something for God to do. But then there comes a question, and I think you brought it up already. God works through our hands, right? So how do we know when God is working through our hands? We're talking about a time to kill. God, as I mentioned on previous shows, God is the only one who can determine what's right and wrong. We can take guesses at it, but God is the only one. So how do we determine, by God's wisdom and grace, when is the right time to kill? There's a concept that I like to share just briefly, and that is, you heard of people, they get in these relationships, and then someone decide to break off this relationship, and then the person goes like crazy, and they kill that person and they kill themselves. It's just like the person who lost it all, like they died on the inside. The person who separated was not thinking about the life that was being woven together. They were thinking about the situation, perhaps self-preservation. Okay. And so then again, we're looking at, and that's something that God put in us too, self-preservation. That's a divine principle, cannot be refuted. We do what we do in order to preserve, because we are important. If to nobody else, we should be important to ourselves, because the Bible says, love your neighbor as you love yourself. So we're preserving. So then when is that right time to kill? Before we go on, there is one other clip I would like for us to look at.
Now, there are fears that a polarizing election will further inflame the culture war in the U.S. This week, the Department of Homeland Security warned of a rise in right-wing terrorism. The potential targets, including the LGBTQ community, as well as racial and ethnic minorities. Now, while the debate over gun controls remains deadlocked in Washington, one organization says the best protection for vulnerable groups is to give them guns as well. DW's Amin Isif caught up with them.
Now, this is what we're talking about, right? The guns are for protection. Now, think about it. Whose side then are we on? In 1861, we had the Civil War jumping off. And we had brother against brother, North against South, and things of that nature. We have domestic violence within our home because everybody's doing what they believe is right in their own eyes. The Bible even says that in Genesis that God sent the flood because everybody doing this violence. It said violence increased. But underneath all that, it was justified in the minds of the people who were perpetrating the violence. So here we have now an advocacy to give everybody guns so they may defend themselves. Now, this is not new because, as you mentioned, Mr. Johnson, right? I said to Mr. Johnson, "It's my student. We call him Mr. Johnson." It just feels strange to me. Well, he's my buddy. But here we have you remember Haman, the guy who set up Queen Esther. And he got this noose together, and he just put this plan together to destroy all the Jews, the Hebrews. And Queen Esther went into the king and told the king about what's going on. And then Haman was hung by his own noose. And then the king gave the Jews permission to defend themselves because he couldn't be big on the law. He gave them permission to defend themselves, and therefore the people were not so lackadaisical or in carrying out that other particular law because they knew if they killed, they may be killed. So there was no need to go about it. So there is justification for defense. I'm just wondering, when is it justified? When is it time to kill? You got something for me, Mr. Johnson?
So I'm thinking about the term choice,
Okay.
and mental health. Those two things come to my mind when we talk about this situation at all times. Is a person in good mind and body? Meaning, is their body in a good position to help them make good mental and clear decisions? That's the first thing. And then the choice, we all have choices, the abortion issue. Is it killing? Is it not killing? But it's a choice, right? And I'm not bringing it up for political reasons, more so than I'm bringing it up for the ability for a woman to take an opportunity to abort a child is a choice. And with that choice, you have the ability to take a life, right? And so now the question is, if a guy who punches that woman in the belly takes the life of the child, that same child now is considered a miscarriage, and he can be charged in some states with murder one, right? And so the thought is, how can the same set of situations create different responses on the same issue? And so we can look at one person who's at war and say, oh, they killed 50 Marines today, or they killed 50 Taliban today. But if the same thing was happening in the city where we live, it would be considered something different. And so, like you said, how do you consider the auspices of choice when it comes to killing? And I think that a position is the main reason. I remember when we were in officers training, they taught us that positions, like the positions where you position yourself to defend yourself, the position politically, the position for resources, and the position that you control for power in the world. And so it's actually what made me get out of the Marine Corps, to be honest, because nothing that they taught me really had to do with us defending our liberty. And then it brought me down to one thing, that a person who is defending their freedom should have the option to kill. That's how I came to it personally, with my own conscientious understanding of when should there be a time to kill. When someone is interfering with my family's freedom, my freedom, whether that's them coming into the house to steal or rob from me, whether that's a political stance that I have, whether that's the democracy of taking away my ability to vote and be free, that's the time to kill for me. That's the time that I feel I am a person who carries at times, and I think that the opportunity to carry gives me the ability to have that good mind and take the choice and the training. And here's the thing. In the Marine Corps, they taught us how to do what's called military driving. And so I could talk on the radio and do other things while I'm driving, so that I'm used to this. Almost 3 months of worth of training. But I see people who are texting, right? They're texting and driving. And we now know that one of the main ways that people are killed is because they text, right? And so somebody made they weren't in their good mind because they made an irrational decision to text while they're driving, and that caused someone else to be killed. Should they be charged with murder? The answer to that is yes, because it's negligence, right? And so that is not the time to kill. And so your position is the thing that I think that allows you to be put in a position to say whether you should kill. Now, here is the thing. When other people look at your position, they have to be able to say, was it done in love? Was it done to stay free? Did this person feel like their life was taken? And if it's not those three things, most of the time you're going to be in a situation where you're charged with murder or some type of manslaughter charge. And the question to me is, if we never had a court, if we were just still in the wild, wild west right now, would we have gun violence? And I say no. Because at some point, the people who were really, really bad would kill off each other. And at the other point, the people who wanted to defend themselves and have a right to defend themselves, which is the Second Amendment, right? The right to carry, right? And so they would protect their positions. What are their positions? Their communities, their neighborhoods. And this is what I had to say about gangbangers once I met them. Some of the most conscientious people I've ever met, some of the most logical people I've ever met. It's just that their position to how they looked at life was that they didn't have the same opportunity to other people. And when you came in their neighborhood, you better fit their quality and their position of life. And so to me, it still comes down to position and the quality of freedom. And, so even in the worst situations, even in Chicago, when I think about the kids who are out on the streets, they're not just out there because they want to be out there on the streets. When you talk to these children, because I have, when you talk to the children in Chicago, on the streets of Chicago, and you're interacting with them, they're worried about where their next meal is coming from. They're worried about if they're going to have warm house in the middle of the winter. They're worried about that their lights are off and that there's no fresh water coming to their house. And so when you start to talk about people in one of the richest nations in the world, where if we just took away something like the Department of Education or the tobacco, the tobacco, firearms, and alcohol, ATF, if we just took away that department and gave that money to the people in poverty to create programs for them, we wouldn't have any impoverished people in America right now. And so the question is, can we put them in a position of stability? Yes. Can we put them in a position where they don't have to feel like they have to kill each other to go after limited resources, by which, and I want to say this wholeheartedly, if we take all 8 billion people that exist on the planet right now and we stand them side by side, they will barely fill up the city of New York. They would go over the city, but they wouldn't go outside of the state of New York. And the question is, if you took everybody on this planet right now and put them in the state of New York, everywhere else would be a resource. And so what we're saying is that there are too many people, and that's why we don't have the resources that we need, and that's why we have the reasons to kill. And so I think when you take away the process of poverty, the only thing that you're dealing with could be jealousy at that point, enviousness, because now is he in a better state than I am? Is he have more than I do? That's the only thing that you're dealing with now. You're not dealing with the lack of a resource. You're dealing with the enviousness or the jealousy of a resource. So these are just some of my thoughts, as we're panning through the reason to kill. And I think that if you put people in a situation where they're in a good mind, that you want.
Well, that's profound, and I hear what you're saying. I really do, and I'm interpreting what you said is we got to show love. We got to show that we care.
At the end of the day,
Jesus said, "If I was hungry, you fed me. When I was in prison, you visited me. When I was naked, you clothed me. When I was thirsty, you gave me water." The remedy of our situation is not beating someone upside the head or shooting them in the head or things like that. It is really loving. We find people who, well, let me say, but when it is how we are actually indoctrinated, how we are taught. Because if I'm taught that you are a threat to me and you mean me harm, you're going to take food out of my child's mouth, you're going to prevent my son or my daughter from getting a decent job, then I consider you a threat to my life, to my longevity, to my health. And the question that, and I never thought about 8 billion people in the state of New York and filling that up. That's quite interesting. I got to do some research behind that statement, though. But nonetheless, that will be a lot of resources out there. So, true love, then, you have, for instance, if I'm trying to take care of myself, and I want to make sure, like the man who built his barns, you heard that parable. The man had barns and he had so much crop, the barns were too small, so he built bigger ones. And Jesus said, well, you fool, tonight your soul is required of you. And then there's a statement of Jesus speaking to a rich man who said, well, what must I do to be saved? And Jesus says to that man, sell everything that you got. And that right there will cause somebody to lose their teeth and everything up. Sell everything that you got, give it to the, poor, take up your cross and what? Follow who? And the man walked away sorrowfully. Because the question is God able to take care of me? Is he concerned with me? And then the other from the man who walked away is, no, I gotta take care of mine. You take care of yours. I got this way, that way. The way I got it, you're gonna have to get it. I got mine the hard way, you get yours the hard way. And so, but in doing that, are we not killing? That's the question. When we are not taking care of the widow, when we're not taking care of the poor, when we're not taking care of those we call, for the sake of a better word, the ignorant people, those who don't know, when we're not educating them, we're not coming alongside of them and giving them some type of tutelage, are we not killing them? The breath may still in their body, but they may be walking dead people. Maybe walking dead people. There's a I'm gonna break for this commercial. This blew my mind because it's about killing. Here we have someone is trying to kill the bacteria and bugs and germs in their home, and so they buy this product. And so watch this commercial. I'm going to try to put these health commercials on this podcast because I find it very helpful. Are we ready for that? Yes. Let's roll that and see what happens.
Welcome back. A cleaning product that may be in your cabinet has been recalled over concerns it could make you sick. The Consumer Product Safety Commission says 4.9 million bottles of Fabuloso may contain bacteria. The concern is it could cause serious infection with people with weakened immune systems, underlying lung conditions, or those who use external medical devices. If you have the product, you're asked to take it back to the store for a refund or a replacement.
Get that now. We mean to do well. We want to clean up the counters. We want to clean the toilets. We want to clean the floors. And we're doing the best we can with the knowledge that we have. But after a while, someone does some investigation and we find, whoa, I need to change up because I'm killing myself and I'm killing everybody else around me. I need to change. You know what I'm finding out, though? That a lot of times we're not willing to change. We say things like, oh, my mama used this when I was a kid and it didn't do me any harm and so forth. And by willful ignorance, aren't we killing? There's a time to kill, but it's to do so ignorantly, willful ignorance. There's a lot of people today who are dying because other people who have knowledge are turning their faces another way. And they think it would not affect them. A time to kill. So ignorance is a killer. That's why we should be studying to show ourselves approved unto God, workmen which need not be ashamed, but rightly dividing the word of truth. Someone said, well, do you mean the Bible, right? I said, yes, right. But at the same time, God has another book. So what's that? I said, nature. You have to study science. If you don't study the science, you could be hurting other people. You must study science. And what I found out is that the person who has committed himself to Christ, I found out these individuals have invented or done things that will help society and not hurt it. So killing bugs, that's another thing. So what do you think? What do you think about that commercial?
You know, as I'm coming to an understanding fully about the chemicals in America, is that we put a meter on everything. What do I mean? We put a meter on electricity. It should be free. It's freely created. We put a meter on water. We buy it for 99 cents. God created it to us for free. We put a meter on food. And that meter has a seed in it. A watermelon has close 80 to 200 seeds in it. It can create another watermelon that has 200 to 300 seeds in it. And that's exponential freeness. And the question is, why do we find the need to create something from a chemical compound that could be harmful to us when we can create it from God's natural compound and it goes with our body? That's my first thought on the Fabuloso issue. But the other issue is when we create toxins for our environment, then we freely begin to kill the essence of who we are from our position of freedom. And as a zeronaire, I don't know if you can see at the bottom of that's the name of my construction company, but it's a socio-cognitive economic model that talks about why do we pay for all of these things and then we create this level of slavery that causes us now to kill each other because of this lack of resource. And so the other time that I say that there's a time to kill is to create access to those resources that create freedoms for us. And so, I'm not saying go kill for a Dolce Gabbana purse or a pair of red bottom shoes. That's not what I'm talking about. That's not a resource. That's a want. I'm talking about food, shelter, and clothing. I'm saying when a person has to pay $230 to take a shower every day for a month, times 12, times the amount of people in that city, times the amount of people in that state, that's a freedom that's being taken away. Water is free. Shout out to AWG, the alternative water generator gentleman, Mr. Moses, who creates water from the air.
Yes.
Creating these systems can create our freedoms, and creating freedoms could give us alleviate our ability to want to kill. But looking at the Fabuloso issue, I would say that it was done on purpose. And I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but usually you can't come into a system where you don't know what's in it before you send it out. And the question is, was it tested? I think about Formula 409. They said the guy went through 408 formulas before he got to that, right? And so if that's the case, what made 409 perfect? Because he tested it, because he made sure it wouldn't hurt the environment, because he made sure that there were no PFAs in it that would contaminate our water. And so the same thing I say, we should make sure that we hold Fabuloso to the fire if these allegations are true, to give them that same litmus test, making sure that we create a situation where we're not putting pathogens out there that are allowing individuals to be hurt. Speaking of pathogens, there's something called chem clouds. Have you heard of them?
Yes. Yes.
So
tell us about it, though.
So chem clouds have harmful materials in them. Thus, that's when you see the cloud, you see the plane driving above, and it drops something out. Now, people for the last 20 years, they talked about me and they laughed about me. Well, guess what the state of Tennessee just did? The state of Tennessee just passed a bill, and I wrote that bill name down so that people can fact check it. It's called Bill Number SB 2691, where they don't allow chemical clouds in the state of Tennessee anymore. So now we can no longer say that chem clouds are not real, because you can't create a law you can't pass a law that says that you can't have chem clouds in that state if it wasn't real. Let's start there. But then the question is, some of the researchers from that, if you go to the white papers, you will see in the research for that bill that in areas like Memphis, like East Nashville, like Southwest Knoxville, and like the east side of Chattanooga, where primary urbanites live, that they had a higher level of killing and or domestic crime domestic violence during the times where the chem clouds were sprayed. And now in those areas, because they're not sprayed, guess what's happening? The violence has gone down. And so we can say it's correlational. We can't say it's causational. We can say it's correlational. And because of that, we now know that chem clouds are real. We now know that chem clouds have put us in a position to kill other people. And so now the question is, what do we need to do in our local communities to start to be more proactive, to be against these type of things, so that people can be free from the worry of being killed, therefore being free from the worry of having to carry a weapon?
Wow. Hope people can follow us. This is cool.
There isn't a necessary time to kill, because your whole position have changed. If you're not allowing chemicals to come into your drinking water and into the skies above you, and like CRISPR, CRISPR is an acronym. Look it up. They put this into your food and allow vaccines to be transferred, allow mRNA vaccines to be transferred. These are things that we need to be on the cutting edge about, to make sure that we're against these things, and that these things are known amongst us, and that we have, even if we have to take them, what can we use to get them out of our bodies? If we reposition ourselves, because earlier I said that there is a time to kill because of our position. But what happens if we reposition ourselves? Hopefully our audience gets this. If you reposition yourself, then the necessity for the time to kill can be eliminated.
It's interesting when we talk a time to kill. Sound like to me you're saying if we live wholesome, harmonic lives, there will be no need to kill. It's the threat of taking the life that cause people to defend themselves, or the idea of their life being threatened, to defend themselves, whether that idea is right or wrong. That's why the killings take place, right?
That's
interesting. Very interesting. Very interesting indeed. You know, I just lost my train of thought. And I got so caught up in these chemtrails and stuff like that. But that's fine. Oh, I know what it was. When we talk about the 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 atmosphere, the environment, we ourselves, our bodies, is an environment. So if
Yes.
I consume something, you may mention earlier, if someone get into a car and they let's say they've been drinking and they end up in an accident and someone is dead, they should be fined with manslaughter because they should have known you don't get behind the wheel of a vehicle intoxicated, right?
Right.
So then someone dies because of that. So even though initially, well, I'm not sure say initially, when you get behind the wheel, I mean, you need to recognize that you have a responsibility. The impairment, it doesn't matter how small it may be, a distraction. That's why they talk about no talking on the phones and this, that, and the other, because that can cause someone to seriously get injured. So here's the question. Is society responsible? I'm talking about the ideology, the philosophy, the culture, the worldview of having a good time. Because when a person goes out to party hardy, right? I got this going on, I got this going on, and okay, I want someone to take me home because I'm uber drunk.
Inebriated.
Yes, thank you very much. Okay, so I got I'm spinning in my head. I go home. Now I have drank so much, I have poisoned my system. I close my eyes and I can't open them again. I die right there because of the toxicity in my body.
Mm.
A time to kill, right? Should I not, if I drink, and I don't advocate it, but that's alcoholic beverages, if I drink to have a good time, when should I stop? I think it's the responsibility of the individual. Now, you're dealing with, if I'm um, uh, a person who brews beer and I manufacture vodka, alcohol, whatever the case may be, and I sell it. Am I responsible for the consumption of the people, particularly when I sell it the way I sell it? And
Mm.
of course, the laws will tell no, you're not responsible for that because everybody who buys should understand themselves. So the question is there a time to kill? And I go back to the place where you mentioned, Mr. Johnson, those are choices.
Mm.
We have to watch how we are positioning. Is it going to bring life? Is it going to bring death? And so when an adult goes out, you leave the children at home because it's adult time now, and you go out, and while you're out, the babysitter does something to your child that they had no business doing. You have accepted that babysitter, but did you vet that babysitter? Does that babysitter have the same ideologies as you? Do they
Mm.
have the same moral fiber as you, philosophy as you? I think in it's like pulling the trigger because if a parent does not take the time to make sure that whoever is watching that child is right, then they might as well. And I know this is hard to take. They have just about pulled that trigger too, unless the person was deceitful and did certain things. We have to do our due diligence. There's a time to kill. And then we have to ask, I like to ask, where is God in all this? Where is God in all this? I want to break for another commercial here and find out before we come back. And that's the question I want us to get to. Where is God in all this? We have free choices, but aren't there times when a person make a decision to do something and there's an intervention? Where is God in all this? All right, let's go to the commercial. Not commercial, you know what I'm saying?
The chaos unfolding in the heart of the Las Vegas Strip. 10:08 p.m., 22,000 country music fans packed in, enjoying the Route 91 Harvest Festival. But high above them on the 32nd floor of the glittering Mandalay Bay Resort, police say 64-year-old Stephen Paddock was watching. They say he hammered through the hotel's thick windows and started firing on the crowd below.
Now, this is in Las Vegas a few years back. And this man just have a melee on people who are partying. They had no intention, no thought that that man would be in that window. Now, I've always asked the question, when someone does that, what is going on in that person's mind? We can't blame the people at the bottom, or can we? What is his perception? Could it be avoided or not? Was that a right time for him to kill? And we have to remember Jericho. Was he called of God to do that or not? Now, some people would think that and we're going to talk about, again, some people even applaud him because where he did that shooting. Like some people would applaud the people who came in, I think Hamas, who came in when the young people were partying. And they came in and they killed those people there because for them, that was amoral behavior. It was not according to the laws that they understood. And they were getting away from the strict teachings. So they need to have some correction there. And besides that, the land and everything else, all the political stuff too. So we have people who would justify those types of behavior. And the question is, where's God in all this? And where may be the minds of the people when they are doing such things? I know we don't know the hearts of everyone, don't know the hearts of it. I barely know my own. But let's look at this thing and think about it. What do you say, Mr. Johnson?
Well, for me, and I go back to what I've been studying over the last few years, specifically after COVID, and that's nanotechnology. And the use of nanotechnology in our food, in our vaccines, in our skin products. And one of the things that we know about nanotechnology is that nanotechnology can be networked. And think about this. You spray some spray on you out of your perfume bottle, that's 1/1,000,000th of a drop, meaning it's a small drop, but it's so many millions of a drop. Nanotechnology is smaller than that. Is a computer-sized technology that can be controlled through network technology. Now, my thought is, with 5G so close, now going into what we're calling quantum technology, so close to our homes. Some of our homes have 5G right outside the building on the light pole. With it so close, can nanotechnology be controlled through a frequency? And the answer to that is yes. The NIH have told us that you can control nanotechnology and how it moves. Something as simple as to sound. And so there's something called graphene that nanotechnology is made out of. We now know that it's a part of the Chem Cloud program. We know that it's a part of our mechanics program. We know that it's a part of our food processing programs. And the question is something as simple as us playing music in our car, does graphene move to the frequency of music? And the answer to that is yes. Now, this is just the chemical itself. This is not the chemical made smart. After the chemical is made smart into technology, not only can it move, it can be controlled and it can be told what to do. And it can create other frequencies in your body. Now, the question is, do you have vibes? Do I have vibes? Yes. People who are looking at us right now can see that we're, for the most part, trying to be honest people and give them information so that they can make wise decisions. And the question that I have to us, can a technology now that is proposed to help us, can it also be proposed to hurt us? And so my answer to that is yes, that something that can help you can also hurt you. Because think about something as simple as a medication, right? When we have a medication, that medication is proposed to help us, but it has side effects. Those side effects, sometimes they hurt us if our bodies are not strong enough. Now, to your question on why people make decisions that they do, My question is, are a lot of the people that we're dealing with, are they in good mind, body, health, and mental clarity, like we talked about at the beginning? Are all of these people outside of that, or is something else going on? And I think that it has to do with nutrition, whether that nutrition is the food that we eat, the particles called PFAs that we take with those foods, or engineered food, also known as genetically modified foods. And if that's the case, does our body have the ability to nutritionalize them and then help us to make good decisions, or nutritionalize us and help us to make bad decisions? When we looked at school children who ate a higher level of sugar, just sugar, something that's good for us, that's allowed through the FDA, the kids could not sit down. Vic, Dr. V, they couldn't stay still. At some point, people were being diagnosed with ADD and ADHD because of that fact, because of the food that they ate. Now, the question is, when you take the foods that they're eating out of their lives, can they begin to get back to some type of normalcy? And we've seen to that answer, yes. Now, the question is, do we need to be, and you talked about this earlier, in a holistic as opposed to chemical decisions? And it goes back to the fabuloso. It goes back to the chem clouds. It goes back to all of these things. And the real thing that I say is killing us and making our lives shorter is the daily decisions that we make on what we put in our mouth. And that time to kill, we can certainly control that. We have the apris motorandi, the ability to control that, what we actually put in. So are you putting in artificial foods? 85% of what you buy in the grocery store is not good for you. Why is that? And so the question is now, what is the time to kill? To recap, you're in a position to kill. There are times that it's a good time to kill if you're in that position. But how can you reposition yourself so that there's not good time? You can change your diet. You can be active in your community to make sure that individuals are not making poor decisions on your behalf because you're not there, and by default, they make decisions for you. You can be a part of the bigger picture. One of the things that I like is, in the last 9 months, I've met with white nationalists and asked them why they carry. And most of the white nationalists that I've met, 95% of them are great people. They just want the nation to be free and clear so that they can prosper. Now, there are 5% that are left or right wingers, whatever you want to call them, that are extreme, and they're doing extreme things, and I'm not interacting with them. But for the most part, I respect them now because they're just saying, we want to be holistic. We don't want to be in a position of globalism. We want to make sure that our voice is heard in our own communities. And that's what I think that we have to do to reposition ourselves, to get out of the time that's allowed for us to kill. We have to reposition ourselves so that we can say, like Tennessee, no chem clouds. Or we can, like Florida, say, Russia just said no GMO, genetically modified materials. The Fruit Loops. Europe does not even accept the American Fruit Loops. Did you know that?
Yeah.
It's crazy.
And Skittles. Skittles, too.
Yeah, Skittles. It's some basic things. And so now I encourage everybody to just take a look at all your candies. You're going to see a word called engineered foods or engineered, bioengineered. When you're seeing that, know that it's not something that's good for you. Know that it's something that's designed not to be nutritionalized with your body, although whoever the powers that be in the USDA have allowed us to put them in our foods, that don't mean that it's good for us. And the question is, we need to kind of write the course now. I'm excited about Robert F. Kennedy being over the United States Department of Agriculture because of his extremisms. And I think that you got to have somebody who's like the median in the road. And I'm looking forward to our kids just having some good Fruit Loops to eat if they're forced to do that.
It's interesting, you know, your audio, it kind of slowed up when you say you're excited about Robert. Would you repeat that?
Wow.
Would you repeat that,
I'm
please?
sure. Yes. So Robert F. Kennedy is going to be Trump's U.S. Department of Agriculture czar, if you would. He's over that board, that cabinet. he's the cabinet chair for that. And so I look forward to him making large movements in retrospect to some of the things that we're dealing with as it relates to food. You know, the Amish people had their, and that's why they came out and voted this year. They had their natural milks that were non-pasteurized thrown in the garbage by the Department of Agriculture. And droves of them in the state of Pennsylvania came out and gave Trump the vote. Now, whoever you're for, I'm just for the freedom of making sure that people in their own private communities have the ability to make their own private decisions for themselves. And why would you go in these people's private compounds and throw away their food that they've been thriving on without the lowest recidivism of COVID, the lowest recidivism of Zika, the Zika virus, the lowest recidivism of the Niles viruses by the mosquitoes in their areas? Because I think it had to do, we can call it correlational with the foods that they ate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, interesting point. Now we're looking at this, and I'm hoping that let's look at this next shot here, because we had an incident just this past week about a young man in his 20s who took matters into his own hands to deal with the corruption of the insurance company. Let's look at that.
Apologize. Identifying a motive is our top priority. But at this time, it appears that the motive was a combination of factors. On the question of bullying, we're talking to students to understand whether bullying was one of those multiple factors that I mentioned earlier. Some have asked if people were specifically targeted. Everyone was targeted in this incident.
Okay, well, it was not quite the video shot that I wanted, and that's my fault, but we can still come back to that later on. But let's talk about this shot here. When I say talk about that later on, there's a situation that happened a few days back. A 15-year-old young student took matters into her own hands. The motives are not really that clear, but I can only surmise that there was something that really disturbed her. She goes into this study hall, and there are two children now who are fighting for their lives. At least that's the last report I remember receiving. And a teacher and a student was killed. The others were wounded. And so looking at what's going on, the convoluted things that these children are hearing, it's just like fighting among adults, you know, and then you have school system, and this was a religious school too. And the week or two before that, there was an Adventist school that was attacked. So some of the things that we're talking about today, under the umbrella of A Time to Kill, how do you see these attacks on the school and the impact that these children are making, these people are making? They're making a choice. This is now a time to kill. So why are they making that decision at this time?
You know, when I look at what children go to today, they have an overload of information that comes to them, but don't have the leadership to teach them how to cipher through that information. You know, like I think about children having access to something like pornography online. They have access to how purpose is driven. They have access to the LGBT community and how that community is changing something as simple as the pronouns. So now they were taught that them and they mean more than one, but now I, as an individual, can say that I'm a they and them. And so there are so many things that they've been introduced to, but their frail minds and their young, immature minds aren't ready to address. And so because they have this overload, what we've been seeing in the millennials is that they have something called failure to launch. the inability to make decisions based on too much information. And so the question is they've been bombarded with that energy so much that they don't even know what their purpose is, and they become purposeful less, or there is no purpose. You know, when my grandmother cooks a pineapple upside down cake, the purpose of that is that it's not going to taste like a German chocolate cake. You're going to taste pineapples in that. You're going to taste some vanilla. They're the ingredients for that. And what's happening now is that our children are so bombarded that if they're made a German chocolate cake, they don't know that they're not red velvet or that they're not pineapple upside down. There's so many interfering qualities. Even in church, if you go to the back row, you'll see children on their phones while the sermon is being preached. Or if the students now have access to the internet while they're being taught, the teacher doesn't know if they're online. You know, certainly their IT departments can stop them from doing certain things, but the teacher doesn't absolutely positively know what they're doing because they're being bombarded. And so I think it's the bombardment that causes children to go mad. We haven't talked about food. We haven't talked about chem clouds. We haven't talked about PFAs in water. We haven't talked about CRISPR and nutritionalized GMO in their foods. We haven't even introduced that to that situation yet for them to be in their mental state and good mind. And so we have to start giving them clarity. One of the clarities is shungite. It's a stone that blocks radiation from your phone. No, we didn't even talk about that today. How your phone gives you radiation, how your iPad gives you radiation, how those things radiate to you. One of the disclaimers in the iPhone that I have is that I should hold it so many inches away from my face because when I hold it on my face, it gives me a certain level of radiation when I'm talking on it without a battery attached to it. But when it's attached, some of the kids sleep with it attached to it and to the electricity in their thing, and it creates radiation. And so there is this bombardment that we're having with our children that you and I did not have when we were children. We were outside playing. Now, if you can get a child from in front of the PS5 or the internet or just in the black hole of searching, that time to kill becomes a convoluted situation. I'm thinking about Grand Theft Auto, for instance, and seeing how we ritualize, we traditionalize, and how we make it normal to, by grand larceny in a video, take somebody's life and then take their car. These things are normal to these children. You know, how we're saying Fortnite, how there's these weapons that we can tell. Listen, there are some children who play Fortnite, and I was in the Marine Corps for almost 8 years, who knows the sound of certain arsenals better than I do. Oh, that's the AR-14. Oh, that's the M16-12. Oh, that's the M16 grenade launcher. They know just from using it on the video game. And so you have this high intelligence coming into a 10-year-old and 11-year-old. What happens when they have access to a weapon that they're not ready to use? Wow. And I think that's the real reason that we have children doing that and having these opportunities to take these. They're using their parents' Second Amendment rights to trespass on somebody else's freedom. And this is a time that I think is to kill. I think that a person who, certainly we should try to talk the person down, but I think that it's a time to kill when a person tramples on the ability for another person to live. And so unfortunately, I think that person was taken down or killed themselves. I don't know which one it was, because it's happened quite a bit in the last 2 weeks.
And once again, what you're saying, you know, if you're trampling on someone else's ability to move forward, and I think, what if that person's ability to move forward is coming onto your turf, your idea, but they don't perceive it to be so? And this is where I would like for us to really look at the sovereignty of God, because you're absolutely right. But then, whose turf are we on? It sounds like I'm listening to this, and I want everyone to know, and whoever's listening to this program or watch this program, the conclusion of this program is becoming more and more It's not planned. I'm gonna tell you that right now. It's not planned. We're gonna let God work with this thing here. But what I'm coming to with this discussion, Rob, I'm sorry, Mr. Johnson.
No, Rob is good, B.
What I'm coming to is that we are in the land of killing. This is the killing field because everybody is doing it, whether we are eating or sleeping. People with these planes are dropping all these chemicals down. They're doing what they think that ought to be done and trying to control the weather. They're causing disease and cataracts and everything going on. People making washing cleaners and cleaning stuff and what's going on. Uh, I got this eczema going. That's what parents smoking cigarettes while the children being born within their wombs. You got all these things going on that we do. It makes me wonder when it says all have sinned and come short to the glory of God. It makes me wonder. And, and Jesus said something to the effect. He said, if you offend in one of these, you offend in them all. So if you broke one of the commandments, you broke them all. And so the Bible says, thou shalt not what? Kill. So if I commit adultery, I killed. If I lie, I killed. If I cover someone's place, I killed. So then go back to the first one. We should have no other God but the one who created us. If I have any other God outside of the creator, I'm going to end up killing, whether I can see myself doing it or not. Okay, we're going to take a look at this last video. Okay, I know we've been on this line for a while, and Mr. Johnson, I really appreciate you hanging in here with me tonight. One of the
It's a pleasure to
advantages,
be
I
with you.
think, yeah, amen. One of the advantages is that when you're not live, it helps to go a little bit longer. Okay, let's go with this. Okay, we can see here this man stalks the insurance man and shoots him, not once, but several times, and walks nonchalantly away. The camera is right there. It's amazing to me how they follow them. It's all like it was like a movie. Like, okay, we're gonna have you come from the left, and we're gonna cut this corner, and as you walk, we're gonna pan in on you and keep the track on you. I've never seen. I don't know how that works, but it's quite interesting. That is the case there. Now, what's behind this man's mind, and why is he doing that? Is he upset because he feels that the insurance company is robbing other people? Could it be that he needed some help and was not able to get that help? I know uh, a lot of bad things do happen through organizations and institutions and things like that. But was that the time to kill? According to him and a lot of other people, it was. He represented to some people, as I hear, as a Robin Hood. They applaud him for that. And then you wonder, really? If that was your father or your husband or your son, would you applaud that? And how do you know if he was not working behind the scenes to change the things in the way that you want it to be? Some things don't change overnight. What do you have to say, Rob?
Well, this is one of the things that I study. I study because as a sniper in the Marine Corps, I pay attention to certain things. One of the things that I see is that the person had a silencer on his arsenal. The other thing that I saw that he did not move outside of stealth. He stayed in what's called a normal walking position, so that he could have shot the person and put his weapon back in his pocket and could have looked at the person like he didn't even do it. That's someone who is trained. That's not somebody who's just off the street. And so the person who killed him could not have been the young boy that they're blaming. Here's the other thing, and you may want to look this up with this particular instance, is that his name was Brian Thompson, as I remember, and he had a tunnel under his house that had cryptic messages in it, the same cryptic messages that they say the young man who killed him had. So there was some correlational cryptography that was involved that both of them had access to. And so these are individuals who are correlated to each other. The background investigation is finding. And then also we know that Brian Thompson took 140 million, according to my research. He sold 140 million of his stocks in that company before his company reported to the stockholders that something was wrong with their company, and that it made the stockholders lose billions. And so, for me, it sounds conspiracy-like, but it's basically someone being corrupt and then getting caught at the back end. So he positioned himself in a position where, there could be many stakeholders who wanted to take him out because there was billions in the United Healthcare stock. And so now the question is, who was that person? But as the person who killed him, I don't think it was just an arbitrary young man. That looked like a professional hit. Someone who has a higher level of skill than I do, because of how they did it with ease and how they walked in and out of the person's life, and the person never saw them coming. So that's my position. Now the question is, why was the news able to report it, and how did they have the exact? Because the thing is, they panned in and then they showed a pan out. That looked like something that was a video of that particular process, like you said, like you suggested. But let's imagine for a moment that it was something that the United Healthcare. I think about John Q, which is a movie that Denzel Washington was in about insurance, and how he had checked all of the boxes that he needed to check, but according to John Q, his company changed how they brought insurance from that company. So it changed his insurance because the company changed it, not John Q. And so John Q was paying his insurance, and so he ended up keeping the whole hospital hostage. And so, is it the time to kill? I'm saying if I had been paying for something and I was owed that right, my position would be that somebody need to pay. And so, can we blame a person for putting them in a position for something to pay? It doesn't sound as Christian as we would like, because everybody like to think that turn the other cheek means to be a pushover. And actually, turning the cheek in the Greek mean that if somebody slaps you on this side, they were so angry. That was like saying explorative curse word to you. Then turn your other cheek and let them get everything out, because you wouldn't want them to take the anger against you to death. And so turning the other cheek means that you had to have the courage to allow that person to express themselves enough so that they could walk away without any grievances against you. And in this situation, I don't think that Mr. Thompson, he put himself in a position where it was so many people that his illogical leadership as the head of that company didn't put himself in a position so that people could leave without having any grievances against him. And that's what happened.
Well, so now there's more than one way to do it. Was that the time to kill? This man didn't do right.
No, it was not.
Allegedly.
Yeah, I mean.
Yeah, my mama
not.
always said, 2 wrongs never make a right. Now, this man did not even have an opportunity to defend himself. He was shot in the back. Okay? He didn't even have an opportunity to explain, or given an opportunity, to my knowledge, to say, okay, I did wrong, let me repent, and things like that. It seems to me that when we talk about a time to kill, there has to be an expression of compassion. You give people an opportunity to repent. And this is where, 'cause when I look at God and how he's going to finalize things, the wicked is going to get burned up. There's not going to be any wickedness on earth because everything that goes against life will not live, because only those principles of life will continue to live. But the principles of death, well, that's without life. So there is a time for God. The time for God is you have to allow people to prove themselves to be who they are. There are too many variables for people to say, I know you did this and know you did that. And that's why I believe we're supposed to have, and I believe we have a pretty good shot at it, a judicial system that you go to. You bring the evidence to the courts. You let the citizens decide. These individuals who just would they get their money back because of killing them? Really? Or they're trying to teach somebody else a lesson because the guy that's dead now, he's not going to learn. The family, if he's doing anything, if he had done anything wicked, I can't say he did or not, but if he done anything like that, did the family know? Why would you punish the family? What good would that be? That to me is as out and out murder. The Bible says, thou shalt not commit murder. It doesn't say thou shalt not kill. There's an incident, I think I have it written down here. It says, I think it's Exodus 22, verses 2 and 3. It says, if someone breaks into your house, if someone breaks into the house and is at night, your life is threatened, you got to do what you need to do. But it said, if it's in the daylight, you got just, you can get him another way, but you're not supposed to just kill the guy. He's be punished, yes, but God has a judicious way of doing it, and it is never to be taken like a vigilante type style. We are to be, there's a time to kill. Now, because the Bible doesn't really teach thou shalt not kill. It says thou shalt not commit murder. And then one of the prophets came out with the city of refuge, where if a person accidentally kills somebody. Now, if you take a man's life according to the scriptures, blood for blood, eye for eye, so forth, then the person who actually did so could run to a city of refuge and stay there. As long as he's there, then he's safe. He is not to leave that city. Hopefully they can work things out while he's in the city. But if he were to leave that city, he would be hunted down, and an eye for an eye will be administered, and a tooth for a tooth. So I think in God's way of doing things, there is justice and there is mercy. Not just justice, but mercy too. Jesus, when he was being beat upside the head and beard being plucked out and being slapped around, he mentioned that if he was of this world, then angels would come down and fight. And the reason why the angels didn't come down then, because men have to show themselves. Everybody believes that they're right. But when the innocent is attacked, and you know the innocent, you know that person didn't do a thing to you, why are you killing him? Why are you causing that person to suffer? And so it is the way God does things. I know I'm talking fast right now. I'm trying to get to the point, another point here. And this point I like to bring out. See, God is looked upon as someone who is cruel. When you get to the Jericho, and I love the fact that you brought up 7 days they walked around the city, so they were in 7 days. But in the city of Jericho, people don't think about the women and children that were in there. And they were killed. They were killed. And some people say, well, I can't worship a God who will kill innocent women and innocent children, right? But see, they don't even know God. In their mind, they're thinking that when the life goes from here, and we're going to pick this up at the next program, when the life leaves here, that's it. But the Bible teaches that death is but a sleep, and only God has the power to resurrect. And just killing is wrong because we don't have the power to resurrect. We have no right to take someone else's life unless God has granted that permission. Because if a life is taken by storm or by hurricane or by miscarriage, God is gracious. He can bring those people back to life. They don't even know they're dead. They're totally unconscious. But we look upon that like, oh. Yes, we will miss them. Yes, we missed all that. But God has promised to reserve those people. We have to make sure we don't sit on the throne of God and decide when someone dies just because they may have taken my popsicle stick and I was enjoying the popsicle and I was going to build something with that stick, and this person has taken my stick and they deserve to die for that because that was the last stick that I can get with what I had, and I'm going to miss out on $20 million on that one little popsicle stick. I know I'm exaggerating a little bit here, but nonetheless, so I believe that the time to kill can only be signaled by God. And yes, there is a time when God says, take out this people. God put a hit out on this person, a hit out on that person, a hit out on that person. Because God is the one who is sovereign. And there we have to have the faith. One last point. When the Bible says Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord, it was at the time when God had commissioned the judgment. He will destroy the earth. He's going to destroy it because the earth deserved it. And so when Noah looks up and see, and the eye represents judgment, right? Discernment. He sees in the discernment of God grace. And I believe when we administer the ultimatum, life and or death, they ought to be able to sense grace. They had the opportunity, they forfeited it. If we let them go, they would kill us. They would devastate us. They would devastate us. Oh, I'm running on and on and on. There's one other thing, Rob. Okay, there's one other thing. There was the guy, which son was that, who dug a well, and these people came by and took his well. So the well dried up for the people who had taken his well. He goes, I think it was Isaac. He goes and dig another well. The people hear about this, and they go and take that well. Isaac doesn't put up a fight. He goes and dig another well. Why does he do that? Because he knows that God is sovereign. God can give him water. God can provide for him. And so the people said, well, we every time we take this well, it dries up on us. But when he digs a hole, it becomes a well. So they stop taking his well and they just join him. And I believe this is why Jesus said, if someone slap you on one cheek, turn you also the other. It's not that we are passive. It's saying that we will not fight you unless we really have to. When you stop me from my production, you may take my house, but I'm going to build another one. I'm going to build it. Now, you're going to stop me from building. You're going to starve me out. Now we may have a problem. So I think there's a lot of studying that we have to do, but the time to kill is not ours to make. Judges who misuse their position, lawyers who know they're lying through their teeth and they put innocent people to jail and innocent people, they have to give an account for God. But what is God doing in his sovereignty at this point? Why is he allowing it to happen? Because he wants to show us what we really made out of. Because all the stuff that we're going through right now, I'm speaking to you audience here, all the stuff that we're going through right now, God has promised that when he returns, you're going to experience something that you will look back on your hurt and your pain and your suffering, and you're going to say, man, I go through that again to have this, what I have right now. We don't know what God has in store for us. I have not seen, ear have not heard, neither has it come into the hearts of men what God has in store for his children. This is faith. So when Noah looked up and saw what God was about to do, he found grace in the eyes of God. He saw justice in the eyes of God, and God was pitiful towards him, and he told him, hey, I'm going to build you an ark, brother. And not just me. I'm going to show you how to do this. And then not only that, I'm going to show them what you saw in my eyes. I'm going to give them 120 years to make it right. But they proved themselves to be stubborn, stiff-necked, hard-headed, narrow-minded. And so God said, see, the only people who had sense was Noah and the 7 others, his 3 sons and their wives and his wife. And then all the animals that went into the ark had more sense than those individuals or those groups of people who were left out of the ark. I think that's a story that we need to continue to tell because God is love, true love. Every heartache that we experience, and I experience a lot, every misunderstanding, I know I have. People backstab you and hurt you, and they would kill you if they could kill you, but they put you in a position and don't look back, and now you're squandering, trying to figure out how you're going to get your next meal. That's killing people. But God says, he says, don't worry about that. Vengeance is mine. I will be. Rob, last words for you, man. I said my piece.
I want to remind the listeners that a time to kill is that when you kill your flesh. There's certainly worldly things that you have lavished in. We can all say it. And we have to have the love of Christ who constraineth us. And if we're in a constraint mode, we're killing some of our flesh to not make those worldly decisions and align ourselves with the world. We can be in the world, but not of the world. And so I would like to say there's definitely a time to kill, and that's when we're killing our flesh to ourselves. And if we actually there are people who have actually had killings happen in their families. And I just want to speak to those individuals for a minute. One of the things that we have to understand is that God does allow those things to happen because we have choice. The person who killed that individual had a choice to do that. Now, for us, the hurt and pain that it causes, we have to now remove the veil of us being God's and allow God to become a person who can heal us. And one of the reasons that I had when I went through my first divorce, my first marriage, I got divorced, and I was telling people, I said, it felt like somebody cut my skin off and ripped my skin off, and I was exposed emotionally from the inside, and people could just see me, and I was hurting at that level. And there's a video from Erykah Badu called Window Seat where she's kind of taking her clothes off, and there's this guy who's running behind her, picking up the clothes to bring him the clothes back to him. And what God did for me as my skin was being taken off, and wherever I was emotionally at that time, it seemed like it never could be recovered. He had his son picking up my skin, and where I was in myself emotionally, he allowed that skin to be placed back on me so that I can heal from that marriage. And so that was the first experience that I had where I really feel like God was a healer. And I'm saying, if you're in a place of pain because someone has killed your loved one or because your spirit has been killed, allow God to have that relationship with you that will allow him, if you may, to take that skin that you've shed so that you can be so emotional, vulnerable to the public. But allow him to take that skin, make it tougher, but make it more sensitive, and put it back on you so that it's not the old you, but it's a better you. Allow him to have a rebirth in you in the way that in the things that you've been killed in, so that at the end of time, he can come to you and say, well done, thy faithful servant. And then when you see other people who are in those atrocity states, Don't be quick to give a narrative. Don't be quick to give a remark. Go and teach those people that there is a way to be healed. And I think that for us as a Christian community, we need to kind of get back to that. We haven't gotten to the place where we can go into a place with a Diddy, into a place with an R. Kelly, into a place with a Jay-Z, into a place with some of our other fallen comrades, and gird them back up to perfect health. That's what our world needs now. We need strong men, need strong women, and we need strong families who can take on the auspices of when whatever we've been killed in, our spiritual, our mental, our health, our physical beings, that we have the ability to know that there is a healing God, and that God has the ability to heal us all. And that healing comes through us because we are God's hands, but it's because of God. And when the nation sees that other people who are not with them are able to heal them, then they have nothing to do but look at God. And when the person who's healing them is saying it's not me, but it's the God who lives inside of me, then that person is forced to look at what God is the God that lives inside of that person. And we don't see a lot of that today. And I invite our listeners to invite God in them so that others can see that God who lives in you. But if you're still in position of healing, get a circle of fellowshippers who can unite with you to refix you and help you to heal, to become whole again. That's what I have to say.
Amen. Amen. Invite God in you. Remember, God is love. God is true love. Witnesses of true love is here for you. Tell a friend about it. And hopefully, as you and your friends, your neighbors, listen to the program, your life will be changed for the better. I know every time I'm on the program, my life gets better and better. I heard Mr. Johnson express himself tonight. I've learned a lot myself, even though he used to be my student. I believe I've just become his tonight. So I pray to God that you will allow him to use you. Okay, remember, you enjoyed this program, subscribe, click that button below. God bless you. And remember, God loves you no matter what. Good night.